the old argument is always innovation and distribution, right? If the old organizations, the big incumbents can be that distribution and let the younger, more nimble organizations create innovations to get them to that point. I think, like you say, within the pharmaceuticals industry, particularly the amount of capital required to not only have the idea and create get to the point where you've got a patent and a defendable drug, but then actually just purely the trials process of actually getting it through human trials and getting it to the point where it's accredited to go to market is incredibly expensive. This is why Johnson & Johnson and these guys are well versed in setting those things up. I think the difference here really is that route to market for those very large organizations within the pharmaceutical industry is pretty efficient in terms of what they do. They're very good at that. They have the processes, the operational capability, and the technology in place to actually facilitate those things. In banking, it's not that way. I think if you gave a big bank £1 billion and said, here's the chocolate box of fintechs, buy the ones you think are good, doing something with it afterwards would really be the challenge, because you could buy a fantastic, peer-to-peer lender, you could buy a fantastic KYC system, you could buy a new core banking system, all of these things, probably not have too much money spare after £1 billion, but then actually integrating and weaving all of those things into the tapestry of a great service for your customers is really the really difficult thing to do. Let alone generating something that actually means something, gives meaning to it from a consumer perspective. So while there are lots of laterals around reducing risk when testing, I think the banking industry and financial services as a whole, throwing insurance into the mix here as well, I think they've got some real specific challenges. And most of them, if I'm honest with you, while a lot of people talk about technology and a lot of people talk about regulatory pressures, I think most of them are cultural. I think if you can establish the mentality, the sort of entrepreneurial spark within those organizations that actually are, it sounds trite to call it a can-do attitude. It's the type of thing you would say to a 4-year-old who's getting out of school, right? But actually, if we can create that spark of painting the picture and creating the future, then actually you find people start to act and shape and deliver in a very different way. And that, if I'm honest with you, when you look at the trends towards many more people starting greenfield organizations, that isn't a regulatory thing. It isn't a technological thing. It's mostly a cultural one, because I'm a firm believer that 50 people who love what they do and who are really aligned culturally can do more than tens of thousands of people who are not. And actually, this is really what FinTech is shining a light on. It's, again, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Even like you say, some of the newer sort of core banking systems that are there are based on monolithic architectures and different product engines for different pieces, which for me makes totally no sense given the world that we live in and the commoditization around cloud technology. So I think when you go to the newer players, there's an element here of what they can do and what their abilities are and the right thing to do in order to have something that is understandable and buyable by the customers in the market. If you went to my mum right now and said, hey, so I can change your savings rate based on your spending power, that would then knock off the percentage points on your mortgages, that would give you extra rewards based on the savings that you've got in this account, she'd be like, well, that blows my mind, but I don't want that. Can I just have a credit card, please? So, how you bring consumers along on this journey is really, really, really important. So whether it's N26, whether it's Monzo, whether it's Starling, whether it's Mox, all of these players, I think, are probably in second gear with what they can do. And the reality of where they can get to, I think they can play a major part in evolving the market towards these things. We talk about what the difference is between, digitized and being truly digital. And for us, truly digital really is about I really don't care what product it is. It doesn't really matter to consumers. They don't really understand the difference between a loan and a mortgage and a credit card. And actually, is it the job of those organizations to spend so much time educating people to them, or is it to give them the advice that means they come out of the situation best? If we continue constructing financial services products in the way that we do today, or the way that we have done for the last 200 years, and this really, if I'm honest with you, this gets to the point of why fintech exists. Banks have been doing that, in a digital world. Selling digitized products leaves this gigantic gap between what the consumers actually need to live their lives on a day-to-day basis and what banks are actually providing. Now, fintech really has just looked at this gap between these two things, this opportunity that just sat on the table here of what consumers really need to live their lives, whether it's retail banking, whether it's buying stocks, whether it's running a business. All of these gaps between this thing literally that's just what fintech is. I mean, it sounds stupid when you say it out loud, but it's just opportunity left on the table. And in comes a bunch of entrepreneurs with good backing from an investment perspective and a can-do attitude, and fintech was born. Banking and betting are very, very similar. It's about managing risk. It's just a different license at the end of the day, essentially, in terms of what it's providing. But so he's not not really a traditional banker in that sense. But actually, when he created the in-play capability at Betfair, what they did there was really look at what the need was of the consumer, and actually what the difference real time is to that. Because actually, if you're running a book on the World Cup final, or let's say the Olympics, running a thing on the Olympics, and you've got like hundreds of millions of people watching it, and as the wind changes direction, or the sun glints over the sideline, you're changing your odds because of the impact that'll have on the performance. And you're able to do that with hundreds of million people are watching it, and surface all of that up to people to make bets on a second-by-second basis. Then banking has been left behind, because mortgages and lending and all of those things pale in significance in terms of complexity as it is to that. So for us, what we've sort of faced into with Foundry, and I should say, rather than going the traditional route of building what we think is the right thing to do and then coming out 3 years later with the answer, we've done it in partnership with DNB, who the biggest bank in the Nordic region, to build out what we think is really the answer to that problem. And the problem really that we were facing into is, to your point, with all of the intricacies and the interweaving of all of these different services, as well as if you were to aim to take 70 to 80% of the cost out of the back office, what would that technology look like? And what we've done is we've collapsed all of the monoliths. We've created single engines that can create any financial services, or to a further point, non-financial services product, and built it from the ground up. And the partnership with DNB has been phenomenal. They've been honestly the best partner that we could ever have hoped for in that sense, because they have a very strong belief of where they see the industry going, which aligns very well to ours. They've got a great sense of humor, which is always great in a great partner. And we've been able to establish really, really honest and open communication with them from the get-go, which is really, really good. So for us, Foundry for us is what we think the future of banking technology looks like.